High-tech food fears. Did biotech animal feed wind up in supermarket taco shells? Yet again, new tire trouble. The recall is expanding beyond Firestones. The business of cancer, searching for treatments and profits. And Eye on America investigates the growing danger guarding the coast.
This is the CBS Evening News with Dan Rather reporting from CBS News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Food safety groups have been warning about it for years. Genetically altered foods not approved for human consumption getting to your dinner table anyway. The U.S. government confirmed today it is investigating whether, and if so, how, gene-altered corn may have turned up in Taco Bell brand Kraft Company distributed taco shells. Important to note, as best we can make out, these are taco shells sold in supermarkets, not in Taco Bell restaurants. CBS's Wyatt Andrews has been investigating this story for days and has details.
The charge is that Taco Bell taco shells sold in grocery stores contain a gene-altered corn specifically banned from food because of the risk of allergies in people. While there are no known reports of injury, this finding by a coalition of environmental groups is the most serious evidence so far of the potential danger in some gene-altered food.
This is a potential allergen that is illegally on the market.
The groups are demanding a recall.
We're saying that the FDA should exercise their authority and seize the product.
The culprit is a gene-altered corn called Starlink containing a protein called Crinine-C. It's one variety of corn gene-spliced to make the plant an insecticide to ward off pests. While the biotech industry argues that Starlink is safe, the EPA disagrees, saying information indicates that Crinine-C exhibits some characteristics of known allergens. Kraft Foods, the maker of the taco shells, says it will immediately investigate and test for contamination, but will not order an immediate recall. Why? The industry believes the Iowa lab that did the taco test is biased against biotech products. A scientist at that lab, Genetic ID, told CBS News their results are solid.
We found the DNA of the variety of corn that contains that protein without any doubt.
That finding is a windfall for biotech critics who for years have complained the government never tests gene-altered food.
We do see it as a warning signal to the American public that there's not an adequate system to look out for these genetically engineered ingredients.
The FDA, which is now rushing to test these taco shells, says it has no reason to believe they are unsafe, but that's no endorsement. Neither the U.S. government nor the biotech industry has conclusively proven the danger or the safety of Starlink corn, meaning no one knows if this is safe to eat or not. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News, Washington.
World oil prices soared to new 10-year highs today. The CBS Price Watch shows U.S. benchmark light crude jumped almost $1, closing just under $37 a barrel. U.S. gasoline prices are holding steady after rising 4 straight weeks. The Energy Department says the nationwide average price is $1.56 a gallon. On the Market Watch, concern about the possible future impact of oil prices on corporate profits since the Dow and the NASDAQ down more than 100 points, both. Firestone has collected about 2.5 million of the 6.5 million recalled tires. And now the tire recall is about to expand beyond Firestone. CBS News correspondent Cheryl Atkinson is our lead investigator in the case of the bad tires.
CBS News has learned that Ford is planning to recall more tires, this time Continental General tires. Nearly 40,000 Lincoln Navigators equipped with 16-inch Continental General tires called ContiTrack are under scrutiny. Complaints about the tires date back more than a year, when a Ford National Service Director in Saudi Arabia wrote Ford about several accidents involving tire separations. "I am afraid that I can see a pattern emerging here," he writes. "I am of the opinion that we need another immediate Firestone-type in-depth investigation and seek your assistance before we have more serious consequences to face." A separate email sent to Ford last May repeated the warning. In it, a Ford dealer in Saudi Arabia complains about the way Ford handled the Firestone tire failures, then adds, "I believe you will be shortly seeing Continental tire failures on Navigator." Sources say Ford is now concerned about potential problems in the U.S. as well. This is not the first safety issue involving Continental General Tires and Ford vehicles. The companies were co-defendants in a rash of highly publicized lawsuits over the years involving the Explorer's predecessor, the Bronco II, which gained a widespread reputation among critics for being unstable, as allegedly shown in this Ford test video obtained by CBS News. The Bronco unexpectedly tips onto two wheels at just 37 miles an hour. Now, what's the common thread? One expert and Ford critic told us Ford demands SUV tires that look like truck tires but drive like passenger tires, and that the end result is a weak tire. Late today, Ford and Continental Tire told us none of the Lincoln Navigator cases involve serious injuries or deaths. The companies brief federal investigators tomorrow. Dan?
Cheryl Atkinson. Rush hour traffic in the Los Angeles area was even heavier than usual today as a 3-day-old transit workers' strike forced nearly 500,000 extra early bird commuters onto the Los Angeles freeways. The strike has halted most bus, train, and subway service, and it could last a while. No contract talks are scheduled. 50 days now till the presidential election, and the candidates are now focusing their heaviest campaigning in about 10 battleground states where swing voters could well decide the outcome. Reeling from plummeting polls, Republican George Bush is quickly road testing a new image and message makeover. CBS's Bill Whitaker is watching this latest Bush strategy change in action.
This is heaven. All kinds of babies to kiss.
Babies to kiss and new battles to fight. In an all-out effort to halt his slide in the polls, George W. Bush is challenging Al Gore for the biggest prize of all, middle-class families.
Mine's a plan that speaks to the aspirations and hopes of middle-class families.
Early on, they lined up behind Bush, but since the Democratic convention, they've been drawn to Al Gore, who continues to paint Bush as the candidate of big business and special interests, with huge tax cuts that mainly benefit the wealthy.
Will we squander this chance on a huge tax cut for the wealthy at the expense of the middle class?
These proverbial swing voters are kind of like Jell-O. I mean, they're swinging back and forth rather dramatically. And so the point is to make sure that we're there saying what they want to hear.
So Bush has sharpened his language and sharpened his attack. At every stop this week, trying to prove his plan benefits the middle class more than Gore's, from birth to retirement. He wants tax cuts for all. Gore, he says, just targets segments of the middle class.
It's so targeted that it misses the target. 50 million Americans get no tax relief under my opponent's plan.
This is where elections have been won and lost in the 90s. If you don't do really well among these voters, there's no way the Republicans can develop a majority or even an adequate plurality in this election. It's you got to go hunting where the ducks are. It's as simple as that.
With some Republicans complaining of his less than strenuous campaign pace, George W. Bush now plans to spend more time campaigning and to hit Al Gore harder to win back the middle class. But challenging Al Gore on issues like taxes and health care is a tricky strategy, since current polls show most people think the Democrats handle those issues better. Bill Whitaker, CBS News, Kansas City.
Coming up next on the CBS Evening News, saving homes from destruction, a race against wildfires and time. And then later, the Coast Guard on guard against a growing wave of violence. On the CBS Weather Watch, it wasn't the wind, but the rain. The first tropical storm of the season to hit the U.S. mainland quickly blew itself out today when Tropical Storm Gordon hit land on Florida's Gulf Coast in the Big Bend north of Tampa. It generated heavy rain and some flooding overnight. It then lost strength but still dumped rain as it tracked over Florida to Georgia and then up to the Carolinas. No deaths reported. Another silver lining, the storm brought rain to southern states still suffering from deep drought. In the Rocky Mountain West, the danger again tonight is fire, and the latest wildfire hotspot is threatening homes near Boulder, Colorado. CBS's Maureen Maher is there on the scene. Maureen?
Dan, a long, dry summer is now burning its way into fall. Still, our 250 firefighters out on the line tonight as the blaze remains out of control, threatening more than 100 homes. At the foothills of the Colorado Rockies, it's a race between flames and firefighters.
We had, it blow up down here below us, and then we had a burnout get out of control on the other side, so got a little hairy for a little bit.
Already one of the worst seasons on record, the latest round of wildfires is now making a run on homes just outside downtown Boulder. Some 200 residents have been asked to pack up and move out.
What I have packed up in my car is some artwork and some antiques, and it's kind of humbling when you kind of put everything, your special things in one car.
And despite heroic efforts from the air and on the ground, more than 1,000 acres have gone up in smoke. Right now, more than 30 fires are raging out of control in 9 states. This year alone, nearly 78,000 fires have torched 6.7 million acres. That's double the average number over the last 10 years. And like here in Colorado, the season is far from over.
So we expect to be tested very strongly today with the winds and with the weather.
The weather did cooperate somewhat earlier today, where significant progress was made, but the winds are expected to kick up considerably this evening. Now, firefighters are hoping what they accomplished today will be enough to hold the line throughout the night. Dan?
Maureen Maher on the Fire Watch in Colorado. CIA analysts have a new CD given to them by colleagues in Jordan, but it is not your basic top 40 collection. This is a digital copy of what's called a terrorist encyclopedia, a 1,000-page training manual for followers of Saudi renegade millionaire Osama bin Laden, with instructions on everything from murdering individuals to building huge truck bombs. A court in Jordan today rejected government claims that 28 Muslim militants were part of a terrorist group linked to bin Laden, but 6 were sentenced to death and others to prison for planning attacks on U.S. and Israeli targets. The defendants arrived at court in a heavily defended convoy. They all denied terrorist activities, and the court found 6 not guilty. 12 fugitives, including 4 of those condemned to die, were tried in absentia. The head of Peru's government spy agency, seen in a leaked videotape allegedly bribing a Peruvian lawmaker, reportedly has been arrested by the Peruvian military. Shortly after the video was broadcast over the weekend, Peru's recently re-elected president announced he will call new elections and will not be a candidate himself. That surprise prompted celebrations in the streets of Lima by Alberto Fujimori's opponents, who claim he stole the last election. Condoms have long been rejected by the Roman Catholic Church because it opposes contraception. But a church official writing in the Holy See's daily newspaper now suggests the AIDS epidemic may prompt a change. He suggests condom use to prevent deadly disease may be, quote, the lesser of 2 evils. Ahead on tonight's CBS Evening News, violence against the Coast Guard. More and more refugees and their money-making smugglers are turning very violent. In California today, the first test flight for the X-32A. This, at first glance, weird-looking thing is Boeing's concept for the 21st century fighter jet it hopes to sell to the U.S. Defense Department. The contract up for grabs is worth $300 billion for 3,000 planes tailored for the Air Force, Navy, and Marines. Lockheed will test fly its competing version within a month. The U.S. Border Patrol tonight is holding 19 Cubans, apparently left by profiteering smugglers on an island off Key West. The Cubans were picked up by the Coast Guard, and since they actually reached U.S. soil, these 19 most likely will be allowed to stay. More and more often, intercepting illegal immigrants at sea means violence for the Coast Guard, as CBS's Jeffrey Coughlin reports in tonight's Eye on America.
It was high noon on the high seas.
Just douse gasoline. They're throwing gasoline all over everyone.
8 Cuban migrants in a homemade craft.
Man in the water.
Desperately trying to make their way to U.S. shores.
There was no way they were going to stop. You could just tell by the look in their eyes they weren't going to stop at no cost.
He's eating the poison. The gentleman is eating the rat poison.
Even if it meant hurting themselves or the Coast Guard officers attempting to protect American borders.
He's throwing the gasoline on my officers and myself. And as we grab him to pull him over onto the boat, he's got a cigarette lighter out, and he tries to ignite Petty Officer Emery.
There's smoke in the boat.
While these officers escaped with minor injuries, the Coast Guard is now finding itself face to face with panicked migrants, hurling rocks, even wielding knives. Then there are the drug smugglers, stealing through the open sea at night in speedboats. When they are caught, as this one was last February, they scramble to burn all the evidence at all costs.
For the Coast Guard, it used to be that the biggest threat out here was the sea itself. Violence just wasn't part of the job description. But since the first violent encounter at sea back in 1997, Coast Guard officers have been facing a rising tide of aggression. So far this year, there have been more than 20 incidents.
Migrants are incited to be violent. They're told that if they're violent, it'll work, that they can get in if they resist.
Illegal migrants used to come on their own. Coast Guard law enforcement specialist Chris Carter says the violence has escalated now that smugglers are orchestrating their journeys.
People can make as much money smuggling migrants as they can drugs, and there are lower penalties if they're caught, so it's become a business.
The Coast Guard is determined to put an end to that business. And so, recruits are not only schooled in search and rescue, but also in the fine arts of self-defense.
We don't attack people, we merely defend ourselves. We're not trying to hurt anyone.
They try not to use bullets, but under new regulations, they can inflict a searing burn with pepper spray.
Force your eyes open, force the water in there.
There's obviously the chance that something will go wrong and that somebody will be killed in one of these situations.
For more than 200 years, the Coast Guard has been able to boast it is always ready, always there. Today, they might add, always at risk. For Eye on America, I'm Jeffrey Kaufman in Yorktown, Virginia.
A major meeting in California today could herald a whole new line of attack against cancer. That line is the bottom line, making money. Those attending this meeting to hear the latest research data are more likely to hold business degrees than medical degrees. Elizabeth Caledon has the facts and figures on the CBS Health Watch.
The obligatory vial.
In San Francisco today, about 50 companies, hot on the trail of major breakthroughs in the war on cancer, gathered to show off their achievements.
Where the overall survival is about 50% at 5 years.
It's an unprecedented meeting because the audience is not doctors, it's investors.
This is the first time that an investment conference has focused specifically on a disease sector.
As many on Wall Street grow increasingly skeptical of the promise of the internet and other high-tech ventures, fighting cancer, it seems, is becoming the next big thing. And no one has to be convinced of the need.
Robin Young of the investment company Stevens organized the conference. The company believes the global anti-cancer market is worth $16 billion and is poised to double in the next 4 years.
Going forward, the principal driver behind investor returns in the medical arena will be this whole area of commercialization of anti-cancer treatments.
Investors here are briefed on everything from anti-cancer vaccines to gene therapy.
This business is volatile, high-risk, speculative, but it has the potential of unbelievable returns.
Some fear research might be rushed if the goal in fighting cancer becomes making money. But the National Cancer Institute believes government funding has done all it can to find a cure. Now it's up to capitalism.
Competition implicit in this process is also good, in that it will make sure that the best treatments are ultimately selected.
We're obviously employed to make money for our investors. It's also wonderful if on the side we can also do something good for society.
Investments by their nature are risky, but fighting cancer is one whose payoffs may be too big to ignore in financial and human terms. Elizabeth Caledon, CBS News, New York.
There's a study out tonight about personal hygiene with important public health implications. 95% of people surveyed say they wash their hands when leaving the restroom, but observation indicates only about 67% actually do wash their hands. Hand washing is the single best way to prevent the spread of infections. We close tonight with a look at geography and generosity, and perhaps faith and frugality. It's a survey titled The Generosity Index. Based on itemized tax returns, it finds that residents of some of the nation's poorest states, especially the Southern Bible Belt, are on average the most generous givers to charity, while some of the richest states, especially in New England, are not so generous. Mississippi ranks as the most generous state, Massachusetts the least. One member of the survey group says some see that as, quote, Yankee thrift in action. Others see it as, well, we won't get into that. Part of our world tonight. I'll be back later here on CBS with the special Monday edition of 48 Hours. Peter Van Sant has a preview.
A proud mother of 6 murdered in her own home.
We reported her ex-husband was a suspect. Now he's standing trial.
Ellen, did you want Sheila murdered? Never.
The dramatic final chapter.
Later on 48 Hours.
A special Monday mystery tonight at 10/9 Central Time. For the CBS Evening News, Dan Rather reporting. See you again soon on 48 Hours.
For news 24 hours a day, CBS.com on the internet and on our interactive partner, America Online, at keyword CBS News.
Parental permission to play violent video games? A new law tomorrow. Experience CBS News.